My name is Paul Kraybill, and this is my personal program plan for AOL 528. The overview looks like this. Program topic is called Resolving Everyday Conflict. The target population is adults preparing to do volunteer work overseas for the very first time. The purpose? It's to ensure that everyone has equal training to handle conflict well, especially for all the new staff. So, what is the need? What's the real issue here? What's the need that we're going for? Well, too many adult volunteers who come and work overseas, they actually end up departing early due to interpersonal conflict that they have with other volunteers. So, what is the goal of this training? Well, it's to enhance the knowledge, the attitudes, and the skills that are needed to resolve everyday conflict that happens between these volunteers who are working overseas. So, what are the objectives of this training event? Well, first off, we want to explore the survey results and the trends that come from the impact of conflict. Next, we want to identify the relational impact of listening well and listening poorly. Next, we want to investigate 5 typical responses to conflict. This includes task conflict and relational conflict. We also want to give practice and identify new skills for resolving these everyday conflict situations. And then we want to create growth action steps that they complete during their first month after the event. And we need to explore the impact of this training 1 year later by having another survey be sent. Okay, so what are the outcomes? Well, short term, and these are short term in the sense that they're 1 to 12 months, we want to affirm the need and importance of having conflict training. We also want a reduction of fear surrounding the conflict topic. We also want to see a willingness to engage in resolving this everyday conflict. And finally, for short-term outcomes, we want forward progress towards their 1-month action steps. Next is our medium-term outcomes, and this is measurable changes in the next 1 to 3 years. So, we want numerical reduction of early departure due to conflict. We want less people leaving early. We also want increased willingness to engage in resolving these everyday conflict situations. We also want confirmation of the need for ongoing conflict training events for all of our volunteer staff. Okay, here's our long-term outcomes, and these we'll be looking at in the next 3 to 7 years. We want a continued trend in the reduction of early departure due to conflict. We want less people leaving early due to having interpersonal conflict. We also want a habitual willingness to engage in resolving these conflict situations. And then we need to interpret annual survey results. Every year we're going to do another survey and see where are we at, how are we doing, and then decide, do we need to create new training events, and if so, what topics, and when should they happen, and where should they happen. Next, what are the inputs? What are we needing in order to put on this event? Well, some of the needed resources: finances for room rental, lodging for participants, food to eat, and transport to help get them there. Next, we're going to need a room We're going to need tables and chairs and laptops and a video projector with cables. We're also going to need a whiteboard with markers and a large white paper to use that also has markers. So, what are the relationships between the activities we're going to be doing during the event and some of the outputs? Well, let's start here with activity number 1. There are 6 activities that I'll go through. Activity number 1 is 3 pre-event Skype calls and their preparation tasks. So this one is actually happening before the event. They will have 3 Skype calls with experienced volunteers to get ready in learning about conflict. And the output? This is to raise awareness of the negative impact of unhealthy conflict. So they will find that during the discussion that they will have during these Skype calls. Activity number 2, this is at the event. They'll give introductions and report back on what their research findings are from their pre-event Skype calls. So reporting back on activity 1, they will do that during activity 2. The output, this is to have knowledge and impact of the unhealthy conflict happening in-house or internally in our company. Activity number 3 is learning how to listen holistically. And the output from this is that there'll be new mindfulness of what holistic listening looks like. Activity number 4, we will explore the 5 typical responses to interpersonal conflict. And the output from this activity is to understand these common responses to conflict that everyone has. They will then identify their own default response to conflict. Then they will also be able to differentiate between task and relational conflict situation. Okay, and activity number 5, we want to then give them opportunity to practice and have the integration of these new skills, of these new conflict skills that they're learning. The output is that mastery and use of the new skills even during these practice sessions during the training event. In activity number 6, this is the final activity, we want to create growth action steps. They will create their own action steps and that they'll do during the first month, and will offer a 1-month post-event follow-up to ask, so how did your action steps go? What progress have you made? Additionally, we will offer a 1-year post-event survey to explore the impact of this training. The output from this is the formation of action steps for their first month after the training. Additionally, a new survey of 150 adults will be given 1 year later. And finally, output is to explore this impact of the training event. Did it do what we were hoping it would? Okay, what is the logic model that I used based for this training event? So here is the layout of my logic plan. First, over here are the inputs. These are the needed resources. These can include things like finances for the room, food, transport, use of the chairs, table, laptop, whiteboard, as well as the knowledge and competence of the actual facilitators. These inputs lead to the activities. As discussed before, there are 6 activities that will result in certain things being delivered. So there's pre-event Skype calls, there's the introductions at the beginning and the research findings, learning about holistic listening, 5 responses to conflict, practicing, and creating their action steps that include a 1-month follow-up. As we continue with activities, these bring the desired outputs, or what is the evidence of progress? These are highlighted here as awareness of the negative impact of unhealthy conflict, new knowledge about listening, understanding the 5 common responses, mastering the new skills and practicing it, and then creating action steps that they will do during their first month. Later, we will do a new survey of a different 150 adults just to explore the impact of this program. These inputs or this progress lead to certain outcomes, short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Short-term is the first 12 months. Affirm the need and importance of such training, reduce the fear around talking about conflict, willingness to engage, and then forward progress with their action steps. Midterm, 1 to 3 years, less people leaving early because of conflict, a willingness to engage in conflict when necessary, and then confirm the need for ongoing training. Long term, 3 to 7 years, hope to see a trend of reduced number of people leaving early due to conflict. This habitual willingness to engage in healthy uh, conflict, resolving everyday conflict, and then checking out the annual survey. Is this needed, and how can we do it even better next time? As we continued, there are 2 process evaluation questions that were highlighted. Here's the first question. What were the 6 activities that you did during this training event? Here you can see the data source, the methods that were used, some indicators or benchmarks, and what was the target for success? Here's the second question. What opportunities were you given to practice these new skills being taught? Here you can see the data source, the methods or instruments that were engaged, some indicators or benchmarks, and what was the target for success look like? The 2 outcome evaluation questions. Here's the first question. What is your one key takeaway from this training? Here you can see the data source, the methods or instruments used. Here are the indicators and benchmarks. And then finally, what's the target for success look like? Here's the second question. What new skills or awareness do you now have that weren't there before? Again, here's the data source, the methods and instructions used, some of the indicators or benchmarks for this event, and what's the target that we're aiming for to have success? The 2 impact questions. Here's the first question. What action step will you commit to that will move you forward? Again, here's the data source. Here's some of the methods or instruments used during the event, some indicators or benchmarks, and what are we aiming for? What's the target look like for success? Here's the second question. What internal perspectives shifted for you? Again, this is where the data source is coming from. During the event, what some of the methods or instruments used? Some indicators or benchmarks. And finally, what's the target for success look like? Okay, activity and planning and evaluation. Here you can see activity number 1, pre-event Skype calls and preparatory tasks for training program. So connect with 3 experienced volunteers to confirm that conflict training is valuable. Just to highlight number 7, every participant will contact 3 experienced volunteers to discuss the impact of conflict for other adult volunteers who work overseas. Each one will write a one-page summary of their findings. So this is activity 1 is happening before the actual event. Activity number 2, introduction of the training group and presentation of their and our research findings. The need here, the trend is far too high and too disruptive for adults working overseas, the impact of conflict. Okay, we will present the research that we have based on the 150 adults, and each participant will also be able to give feedback on their own pre-event findings from the 3 Skype calls. This is activity number 2. Activity number 3 is identify the relational impact of listening well and listening poorly. This is all about listening holistically. And some method here. The measurement will be to identify at least 5 examples of the 4 different aspects of holistic learning. These will be written on 4 pieces of paper. So listening with your body, listening with your words, listening with your mind, and listening with your heart. This is exploring holistic listening for activity number 3. Activity number 4 is investigate the 5 responses to interpersonal conflict and explore the differences between task conflict and relational conflict. Activity number 5 is about practice and integrating these new skills of role play, including feedback, what went well, or areas they could improve on. The facilitator, as far as resources and inputs, the facilitator will provide all resource and input regarding what is necessary to set up their appropriate role-play scenarios and provide a safe and calm dialogue where they can practice. And finally, activity number 6, each one create growth action steps and and afterwards have a 1-month post-event follow-up. Then, a year later, we're going to do another survey to explore the impact of this training. This is activity number 6. So part of it happens during, at the end of this event, part of it is 1 month later, and part of it is 1 year later. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed my personal program plan and that you can attend this training. See you there.